Hello, gentlefolk. I'm Dirk Casterly, last bard standing. You may be familiar with some of my work down in the Drowned Dragon Inn and other places throughout the realms. I am here as a special consultant of sorts to bring forth for your bemusement a little bit of information on dealing with the world that we find ourselves in here in this delightful fantasy-scape. In this case, this series is going to be a study based on the approaches different types of adventurers have to their jobs and to the world around them, and figuring out what makes them so special, the right-wing things that make them tick. And being a bard myself, I thought we'd probably start out in something I'm familiar with, being a bard. So, might I introduce you to class warfare? Now, here at Class Warfare, we are going to look at different classes of adventure and, really kind of dig into them and find out what's the attraction for wanting to be one. And I can tell you right now, being a bard is a heck of a ride. You get to do a lot of things that a lot of others don't get a chance to do. But one of the best things that we have going for us is the ability to be a social chameleon. We can adopt a variety of styles and mannerisms that make us fit in just about anywhere. This is in keeping with our myriad special abilities that, quite frankly, allow us to plug into almost any hole that's needed by a traveling adventuring group. Now, that being said, we may not perform as well as some of the people who specialize in a particular role. For instance, we will almost certainly never be out damaging wizards in pure magical combat, nor should we be out healing clerics of our similar level of skill. That is their trade. We can't go blow for blow with opponents of advanced power like a fighter could, nor can we call down the favor of the gods like a paladin. Instead, what we do is we fill in a little bit of everywhere. We slide to where we are needed. And in this way, tracking down bards throughout the histories of these various realms that we dwell in can be fairly useful. Bards back in the day, from first edition, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the bard was a completely different creature than the bards you see before you now. Those bards were a creature of a primal age, and quite honestly, extraordinarily rare. In order to even have a chance of being one, for one thing, you either had to be a human or a half-elf. There was no in-between. If you were a dwarf, no bard. Elf, no bard. You also had to be neutral in some stance. You could still be good or evil or lawful or chaotic, but a part of your personality had to maintain a balance of some sort. This was very important. You could not be considered if that was not true. So, to become a bard, you didn't just go to bard school. If it were only that easy. No, part of the reason why bards were so very rare was in order to be one, you had to start out as a fighter, progress along that path until you reach the 5th level of experience, up to, and not including, the 8th level of experience. Then you had to suddenly go and apply to be a thief. That's a common cut purse. Now bear in mind, in order to do all of these things, you had to have very high statistics. A 15 in charisma to be a bard, naturally. Strength, to be a fighter of any effect. Dexterity, to apply to becoming a multi-class thief. And wisdom, or the druids, who are the final goal, would never even consider you. In addition, you could not be sub-average in intelligence or constitution either, so you had to have no real weaknesses. So after you were a cut purse for a while, again from 5th to 8th level, you then had to go and submit yourself to the Druids. Yes, Druids, yes. It was a strange class back then. The Druids would evaluate you and find out if you really were on the path to becoming a Druid. They basically had authority over the Bards. And in that time, if you were accepted among their order, and quite honestly, if you already went along that very prescribed path, one would think that you were certainly committed to the cause. They would acknowledge you as a bard. You would then be considered a bard, although you would have druid abilities. You would also have the druid prescriptions, at least as I had ran them. So even though you had trained as a fighter, you would have to say goodbye to any weapons that you use that weren't qualified for being a druid. The scimitar being the most common one, I find. You also generally had to say goodbye to any metal armor, although your time as a thief probably prepared you for that. So, leather armor and some sort of scimitar. When you have that, though, you start gaining some interesting advantages. A bard keeps their combat abilities from being a fighter, so it does behoove you to take a couple of extra levels if you're really committed to being on that path, and acknowledge that you may be in hand-to-hand combat from time to time. So a 7th level fighter is usually the level that you'd be fighting at. Your thief skills would not increase anymore, but you don't lose the ones that you have. And a 7th or 8th level thief does have some fairly useful abilities. Now what you get in exchange for that, whereas most of the classes freeze in advancing hit points after 9th or 10th level, bards continue gaining hit dice after that first level of bard. They continue getting 6-sided dice and adding those onto their hit points, so a bard can have a decent amount of hit points. They will also be quite strong, obviously, and dexterous, making them effective and potent adventurers in a wide variety of pursuits. Your average bard is not going to be a mincing minstrel. They'll be built like a house. So, quite a bit different. Bards associated in colleges based on their level of experience, and they got to be rather elitist. They would not associate with those of a lower college than they themselves occupied. First edition bards were able to pile on languages. Every so often they would get a new one per level, and they came rather quickly. It could be said that eventually a bard would be able to master almost any language they could encounter. Bards had the ability to use their music if anybody was within 4 inches of their space, which is usually to be assumed an inch being about 5 feet of influence. So within 20 feet, a passerby listening to their music could be ensnared with a charm, which potency increased as they went up levels. The victim would be allowed a saving throw, but still, the ability to throw out a charm whenever somebody is listening to your music is a potent ability if you choose to use it. On top of that, they would also have the ability to understand legend lore regarding certain items. This is an ability that carried forth for bards for several editions beyond this. Bards, in addition, had the ability to inspire their comrades, giving a bonus. They would have to spend 2 rounds pumping them up, however, either by inspiring speech or perhaps a stirring poem or ode, and they would enjoy a combat bonus from then on. A slight bonus, but every bonus in first edition was useful. Finally, another ability that bards have had and do maintain throughout the editions is the ability to use a counter song. The ability to counter music effects that can ensnare the mind, such as the song effects of harpies, rival bards, and other things that ensnare with sound. So these were all the bard's special abilities. This was piled on into Appendix 2 of the Player's Handbook in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. With all of the prescriptions and the fact that it was tucked far into the back of the book, bards very rarely saw the table. I cannot honestly remember seeing an NPC bard in any module that I've used, for example, having sample characters. They're just very, very uncommon and very unlikely that somebody would, without deliberate intent upon creating a character, decide to go along that path. It's not something you would actually just stumble upon. You have to set out on a probably the most primitive build to have an access to that those abilities. In 2nd edition, we got a bit of a change. No longer did we have to play around with other classes, we could just be bards. We were a subclass of the rogue brotherhood of sorts, right along with thieves. And in truth, our skills were kind of hard to pigeonhole. We were dabblers in magic. We were somewhat passable as fighters. We could wear up to chainmail armor, for instance, but no shields. Shields were not allowed. We could use any weapon that we chose to, but because we were rogues, we had a very small number of proficiencies. Yes, proficiencies were an option in 2nd edition, and if you didn't have a weapon proficiency, we already didn't have the best attacking tables, so you had to make a pretty smart choice about what your weapon was going to be, and you were probably going to stick to that for some time. Of course, you could go with common weapons like clubs, or what most of us chose was the trustworthy longsword. A good, well-balanced weapon, easy to find almost anywhere, and a large number of magical ones to boot to aspire to, so... What really changed about 2nd edition, though, was going from druidhood and having access to druid spells from 1st edition to having a spell book and being secondary wizards, with a catch-as-catch-can approach to mastering magic. Many of us would scrabble after scrolls and attempt to scribe them into our spellbook so that we could become more competent as spellcasters. We still were limited in how many spells we could cast. We could only go up to the 6th level, for instance, and our spells were restricted by our intelligence, much as the wizards were. But, all things considered, our lot grew a little bit easier. We could learn any wizard spell, so, eventually we could be fireball-throwing bards. As far as the close combat fighting, we only had d6 hit dice, so we couldn't take a great deal of punishment. We also used the rogue attack tables, which were the second from the worst, just above the spellcasting wizards. So, all things considered, our lot was a mixed bag. It was a little difficult to be a bard, but we did have some special abilities that made us unique. Bards still maintained some semblance of neutrality. It was required. Again, we had to keep one aspect of our alignments neutral, so either we could be good, evil, lawful, chaotic, but neutrality had to be a part of that equation, a holdover from 1st edition. We still had access to a few thief skills, but they weren't the exciting ones like finding traps and unlocking locks. We learned how to climb walls. We learned how to read languages, which is nice. We learned to discern noises, and we learned to pick pockets. So we were social thieves of a sort. Our skill levels never quite got up to the level of proper thieves in that regard. Of course, we did keep much of our inspirational abilities. We, of course, kept the counter-song ability, something that we would have progressively as we went. In 2nd edition, the bards still maintained a lot of their inspirational abilities. For instance, they could influence an entire crowd, improving or worsening their action as they chose. This was a nice ability that gave bards a use outside of combat, something that really entered into the social aspect of the bard. Of course, they could inspire their comrades, giving them bonuses in a fight, but they had to spend 3 rounds talking them up, and the duration would be based on the level of the bard, which means at low levels you rarely would have an opportunity to use such an ability. You'd have to talk longer than you'd actually get the bonus. And at high levels you could just do it once and settle it forth for a whole combat. Finally, bards do maintain their ability to understand legend lore and identify magical items. The wording is a little bit different, gives them a little bit more leeway. Not specifically identifying a magical item, but trying to denote its place in history. which can lead you to discovering command words or more exact purposes without having to cast identify spells, which actually cost money. So bards could save a group a fair amount of money with that ability, and sometimes you could lead on to extra adventures by having well thought out items with diverse histories if you're the game master. All in all, the differences are bards lose the druidic tradition. They don't get the mongrel fighter thief druid tag over their heads. They become a lot more stylish. However, they're still not very good at fighting. They're still catch as catch can by spells. Depending on how rich and magical your world is, they may have next to no real spellcasting ability, or they may be practically a second-tier wizard. It all depends on your world and how you play it. More so than ever, a bard had a sense of identity, however. By pitching through all those stages in the first edition, by the time it was done, your bard was something else, not what people consider proper bards. You were part druid, dabbler, fighter, rogue. Now you were a spellcaster, you were a person who was okay at a lot of things, but never going to be nearly as good at anything as everyone else. So you could pitch in, but you really had to pick your spots. Now we come to 3rd edition. A lot of things changed in 3rd edition, but bards actually maintained a lot of what kept them, their own unique identity in 2nd, and just doubled down on that. They still maintained the 6-sided hit die. They still maintained the attack rating as a 2nd-tier combatant. You had the top tier, which were fighters, the middle tier, which were rogues and clerics, and the bottom tier, which were the wizards. Bards were in the middle tier. So they could fight. And in 3rd edition, bards could wear up to medium armor, which would include chainmail and breastplate, and we could use shields again. Huzzah. Bards at this point could only learn a limited number of spells. Much like the sorcerer, they didn't use a spellbook anymore, so that was discarded. They also didn't get access to the top-level magics like clerics and wizards. Instead, they had a 6th level system, borrowing spells primarily from wizards, but also a couple spells from the other classes, too. Bards could do a little bit of healing, for instance, being able to cast, cure wound spells, but also being able to use not these signature wizard spells, the big damaging ones and flashy effects, but we had some effective spells of our own. Of course, a bard still lived on their special abilities, mostly their ability to buff their party members. They had the ability to inspire competence as they went up in level, and their abilities got more advanced the higher they had ranks in the perform skill. So rather than hitting benchmarks as they went up, every bard was going to max out their perform skill, so you effectively could have just put these at different levels, but they didn't. And so you could, at the topmost level, give a sizable buff to your party, giving them more temporary hit points and bonuses to attack and saves, or you could use it to throw suggestions into your conversation to imperceptibly guide the reactions of other people, which was actually a very effective ability if you were a clever bard. But by far, the most commonly referred to ability that a bard had in 3rd edition was the ability of fascination. Because in this ability, if you had a chance to be seen and heard and use your skills, you could completely lock down an enemy. Their minds were ensorcelled, and with the bonuses that you could get with high levels and ranks and perform, special abilities, and once you got access to a masterwork item or better yet, magical instruments, most enemies had absolutely no chance against your Fascinate ability. So you could freeze out one opponent from a battle or situation. This ability was exploited numerous times, giving some bards a fairly shabby reputation as being there just to freeze opponents and help to control the battlefield a bit. Still, it was a signature ability that we took to, and many bards became awfully notorious for being able to help resolve a fight with simple slip of a word. However, the role of the bard in 3rd edition was still very much skilled in a lot of things, but a master of none. We had some abilities that gave us the chance to do things we weren't trained in better than if we were not trained. We still had the ability to identify things with a check against our level, plus our intelligence, and we'd be able to identify magical items and lore and legendary information. So a bard in 3rd edition, like a bard in 2nd edition, is a handy person to have around, but nobody that you are going to pigeonhole into one role, because any of the primary roles in an adventuring party, a bard just can't quite do completely effectively. On the other hand, they work as a force multiplier, making your other people better and sometimes patching in holes where you are a bit weak. Or if somebody goes down, maybe being able to slide into that spot for a limited amount of time until such time as your group can rebound successfully. The Bard is a niche in terms of your classic adventuring party. But again, the Bard has their advantages in having high charisma, a lot of skills, and the abilities to do things in a more social setting than some of the other adventurers can. Therefore, you're going to find that your time dealing with other NPCs can be a lot easier if you have a bard in the group representing you. And this was a role that many bards embraced. Due to the modular nature of 3rd edition, however, your bard could go off in whichever direction they truly wanted to. They weren't stuck in one class or another, and as a result, you could have very stealthy bards who filled in as rogues. You could have bards who primarily worked on their spellcasting and debilitated opponents with their magics. You got a bit of flexibility to play just the kind of bard that you wanted to play. So then we'll go on to 4th edition. 4th edition, I'm not going to lie, I don't have as much experience with 4th edition bards. In my experience, because of the nature of 4th edition, bards play fairly much like any other spellcasting class, except their focus is going to be more on their abilities, giving buffs to their allies and debuffs to their enemies. Changing battlefields by sliding people around a bit, but primarily what you are going to have as a bard is somebody who has a little bit of ability in close combat, a little bit of ability at ranged combat using their abilities, a little ability to, power up and empower their friends, and ultimately not being able to dish out damage like your primary damage dealers, not being able to heal and modify things like your clerics or dedicated buffers, and certainly not able to engage enemies in magical combat the way that a proper arcane caster can. Again, we were kind of left with a middle ground approach. Still somebody who's useful to the party, but is rarely going to be the most valued delver in the group. And everything that I've seen, I have read through the class and understand how it is played, and again, we were relegated to the Player Handbook 2. The Bard was not considered a prime class for 4th edition when it came out, and the Player's Handbook 2 had some odd classes thrown in. Some like the Warden, who really fought by using the rest of their party as their weapons. So, all in all, the Bard kept a lot of the theme with 4th edition, if any of you have ever played it. So now we come to the 5th edition Bard, where we are now, current most edition. The 5th edition Bard now has an 8-sided hit die. We unfortunately are now down to just light armor. The medium armor shields are now gone from 3rd edition, but there's an asterisk to that. Weapons are simple weapons, plus those commonly already associated with bards. Swords of variety. Rapiers especially are quite popular with our type, although I just prefer a common longsword myself. I like the cutting edge. Makes it a more versatile weapon in a dungeon. Probably the biggest change is we are now a 9-level casting class. Yes. We can now cast up to the highest level of magic if we stick to our path. And quite honestly, we're not hampered with weak spells. Our spells are, while perhaps not as flashy as the wizard might have, or as impactful as some of the clerical spells may be, we have a bit more diversity and range with our spells, able to do a wide variety of things. A bit of healing here, bit of inspiration here, debuffing our opponents there, buffing our allies here, along with a few attacks and ways of bedeviling our enemies. Well, let's face it. Have you ever wanted to mock somebody so hard that they die? We can do that. With the right cantrip, Vicious Mockery, which has become the trademark of many a bard. If you start seeing people dead with an area mark on them, could be that a bard decided to uncork some truly vicious mockery on that opponent. Psychic damage doesn't leave a scar. So, could be said that words truly do hurt. But the bard, of course, still maintains many of their inspirational abilities, but now our inspiration is even better. It has been upgraded to the effect of granting an extra die that your allies roll when you invoke the ability to increase their score. It's added directly to whatever they roll. So a mediocre roll becomes good, and a good roll becomes excellent, which can allow people to succeed at even very, very difficult things. And as we get better as bards, as we gain in experience, we also increase the quality of the die that they roll so that they get even bigger bonuses potentially. And how we can use them. For the most part, we generally use them to allow our allies to do a bit better. It's not a reaction so much as a preparation to inspire them forward. As we go on, though, some of the different colleges that we follow have other ideas about how to use those abilities. We, for the most part, lose the Fascinate ability from 3rd edition, which is a kind of an unfortunate loss, but if you really loved that, I've got a college for you that you might be interested in. The downside to our style of spellcasting is that we only learn a limited number of spells. It's true, we only have so many spells that we know. We have a repertoire of the songs that we use repeatedly. As we go up levels, we can get rid of songs that have proven to be not very useful and add new ones that we can use and be more effective as bards. Certainly as our role may change within a group, depending on people dying and being replaced, or finding certain types of foes become more common, we can really be flexible for the group. However, unlike a wizard who has a large spell book and can change out their spells that they know, we're stuck with a limited number in our song list, so a good bit of planning and forethought is a good idea. Now, you can add to those songs. You do get periods where you can add a new spell to your list, and quite honestly, we're allowed to take spells from other classes as well. So, if you really want to throw that fireball as a bard, you can do that. So, the other thing that we have as a strength in 5th edition universally is that we're very good at a variety of skills. For instance, one of our jack-of-all-trades skills, that even if we're not trained in something, we can fake it fairly well and work at half of our proficiency. We also get expertise, which allows us to really be good at something far beyond the level of just being proficient in it, which is very nice for the things that we use often, and for many of us bards, that performance skill is so tasty. But if we really want to do something else, we have the flexibility and variety. If you want to be a skulker in shadows, you can take that expertise and apply it to stealth, because all of the proficiencies you were able to choose are your choice. So you choose what you want to do, and you'll find that your skills will fill in the rest as a bard. And of course, we still maintain our counter charm, our ability to use our magic to disrupt mind-controlling effects, which is a bit better than just being able to cancel music. Now we can, anybody who's mind-influenced, we can attempt to break that. And as there are a number of very good mind-influencing spells and effects out there, this can be a very, very useful ability. Then we talk about those colleges. Remember I said there are a number of abilities that we no longer get because, well, we're a little bit more specialized now. And this is where the colleges come in. If you only have the primary book, the Player's Handbook, you have two colleges to choose from, the College of Lore and the College of Valor. On the College of Lore side, you are going to be going after as much knowledge as possible. So you're going to get new proficiencies. Very nice. You are going to get new magics down the road. Also very nice. You will get the ability to inspire yourself, which is useful. But one of the earliest abilities you get, which is kind of an interesting way to approach things, is the ability of cutting words, which I particularly enjoy. It's the ability when you see somebody else attempting to do something, you can disable their efforts. Basically, it's like a negative bardic influence, and basically rip their feet out from under them with a caustic comment. Timely use of this ability can save your group a great deal of hardship. And as with many bardic abilities, it can be awfully hard to trace. So there are going to be times when, yeah, for example, gambling. If you know that there's a card sharp and you want to break his concentration, nearly untraceable, and you can give yourself an advantage where you can win even against a cheater. This is just one example. If you're a bard and you have any cleverness in you, you'll find the potential is vast. On the other hand, our brethren in the College of Valor, they want to get back into the fighting. So they learn how to put on medium armor. They learn how to tote shields. And they learn how to fight fast. They get an extra attack at 5th level. Just like paladins and rangers and monks and all the other combat-y classes. So that can be very useful for them. Because of the relatively low armor classes in 5th edition and the fact that everybody has the same proficiency bonus, they can, in a pinch, get in there right up with the other damage dealers until the fighters start getting lots and lots of attacks, or the different branches of the fighter paths give you access to other ways of befouling an enemy, but a bard can do fairly well. At top level of their college, they can even cast a bardic spell and attack at the same time. So they get very much into the attacking part of the equation. Possibly one of the more underused abilities of that college, though, is the ability to give bardic inspiration to another and have them apply that die as an extra bonus to damage. Normally, it's a bonus that helps them to attack, but in this case, on an attack that they already have, if they're holding on to that die, they can dish out more damage with that blow, which can take down an enemy faster, can be very useful if used in a timely fashion. So, those are the two from the primary book. But if you happen to get another book called Xanathar's Guide to Everything, well, there's a couple more colleges that have been opened up for you. Let's delve into them lightly now. Remember that Fascinate ability that I told you about from back in 3rd edition? Really a good ability, wasn't it? It was fun. Well, if you like that ability, you might like the Glamour College. No, it's not beauticians. It's people who thought that the Feywild was a really cool place to hang out. And yes, they get a number of abilities which can affect minds of other people. Their base ability to inspire greatness with their mantle of being so beautiful is a benefit that gives temporary hit points to everybody in their group, as long as they have a high enough charisma bonus, and also allows them to move a little bit faster, so getting into position before a fight. Timely use of this ability can save you on healing and, again, help your group to get to where they need to be in a fight. It can be a great way to open up a battle. They also have the ability to adopt a mantle, become supernaturally beautiful, and throw down command effects, where they utter a word and the opponent is so befuddled they are forced to follow that command. That can be a significant ability indeed. At the topmost level, they can always appear superhumanly beautiful, so much so that enemies that want to attack them have to actually succeed in a battle of wills just to compel them to attack. Otherwise, they turn away and can't do it. This can be a potent ability, especially against foes with weak minds. Finally, glamour bards have the ability to charm with their musical performance. Again, similar to what bards had been able to do in 2nd and 3rd edition, but full-on charm that they can insinuate into their music. Again, subtle, but potentially very impactful. Charm can be a very, very useful means of influencing others. Some bards looked at the battle master in the fighters and said, "Hold my beer, I can do that too." They're called the College of Swords, and members within are called Blades. They learn how to wear the medium armor again, but don't care about the shields as much. They use scimitars for their quick slashing effects. They master flourishes, which work a little bit like self-damaging buffs, being able to, for instance, hit an opponent, do extra damage, and increase their armor with a defensive flourish, which lasts until their next attack. They can this by the way can give them a pretty substantial bonus. They can learn to, for instance, make a slashing attack and hit all of their enemies around them within 5 feet, with a little bit of damage. It's not a huge blow, but still, the ability to damage lots of lesser minions, for instance, might turn the battle. Of course, they also get an extra attack, along with the College of Valor. So it's a little bit of a different fighting style. The flourishes can be useful for turning the tables against your opponents and, giving yourself some quick buffs. On top of all the advantages that the bard already gets, it can make them, again, a nasty striker-style fighter. Able to dash in, do some extra damage, and then hopefully survive to get back out again. The last college that we have from Xanathar's is the College of Whispers. Now, these are our shadowy intriguers, and quite honestly, this is one of the groups that can get people to really not trust us bards. The Whispers use psychic abilities, as gained from tapping into the primal fears and terrors of your enemies. Their most notorious ability that they have is to be able to kill someone and steal their shadow, and then use the shadow to take on a guise of the person that they killed. Much like a doppelganger will kill an opponent and then enter into a group insinuating themselves and infiltrating. It's a bit dark, I'll admit. I'm not friends with many from this college, but it is an interesting ability when used effectively. You need the right group, the right storyline going forth to be able to really use somebody from this college well to their maximum effect. A lot of their abilities are best done by themselves rather than with a group, but they are fine intriguers. Even in combat, with relatively small, easily concealable weapons, they have an ability to cause blows to do extra psychic damage, which, again, enables them to, with relatively small pinpricks, inflict lethal damage on an opponent, further masquerading their true ability. The other ability, of course, from the College of Whispers is the ability to use words of terror by talking a great fight for a period of a minute. So this isn't something that you do in the middle of a combat, but you can cause an opponent to be incredibly frightened of you for up to an hour of effect, which gives you the ability to completely dominate that person. Perhaps you would insinuate it into a conversation where you, say, are in prison, and you talk to your jailer using this ability, which can cause him to not notice that you have stolen his keys. It's not often where you'll have a chance to have an opponent where you can sit and talk to them for a full minute before engaging in combat where they are frightened of you, but those who follow this college if they get to use these abilities, can be a telling turn to the tide of fortunes when you're dealing with other people. So these are the abilities that bards have had. That is the progression that our class has taken. And through it all, some things have remained fairly constant. We can do a little bit of everything. We can fight, not for as long as a dedicated fighter, but we can help out as need be. We can heal a little bit, at least since 3rd edition. Even in 2nd edition, we can help out in magical engagements. 3rd edition through 5th edition, we can help out in just about anything. And our inspirational abilities should never be forgotten. The difference between success and failure oftentimes rests upon the most opportune moment to interject your abilities and give your allies bonuses that otherwise might have spelled the difference between success and failure. Depending on your world and the gods that oversee what goes on in your world, you may have extremely tense situations that a bard's abilities may turn the tide on. A simple roll that determines life or death for somebody that you value, a party member or a very important person to your group. Perhaps that ability may be all that stands between raw success and failure. Yeah? So, bards are also the advantage that we are the most socially acceptable adventurer. Let's face it. If a fighter walks into the town and he's got his blood-stained armor and he's got probably about 10 weapons draped around them, people are going to look at that and they're going to be questioning. And when they get up to the epic armor and it gets fancier and more exotic, they even look more bizarre and more unapproachable to the common folk. Many of them don't have the social skills to be able to do much more than order a beer. Wizards, for instance, yes, they have access to the powers arcane, the ability to rend reality asunder and reassemble it to their whim, certainly. But they can't tack their way out of a bar tab under the wrong circumstances. They're going to have to pony up or else, well. And not very many people are going to trust to them as a boon confidant. Not like they will to us. The thieves and rogues of your world, well, certainly they'd be solid on a streetwise level, but trying to talk to somebody above their station, and all of a sudden there's a difficult situation. Besides which, would you want to deal with a invariably black-clad, leather armor, dagger-wielding hoodlum? Would you prefer to associate with somebody who knows how to dress, with the appropriate attire for a profession that anyone would welcome? Who wouldn't want a notable entertainer, skilled in the arts, knowledgeable of the news of the land, in a time when instant access to that information isn't available? Somebody that you can ask or perhaps even retain with a little coin, and be entertained in a somewhat grim world, where nobles would look at a bard of great skill and can think of bringing them into their confidence, inviting them into their homes. Would one do that with even a paladin? They may be trustworthy, but certainly nobody that you would invite as a stranger into your home to do anything other than talk philosophy or ask to do a quest or a guard, the kind of thing that any adventurer might do. No, we can get access to just about anywhere. And a smart bard takes full advantage of that. Yes, you'll find some of our less experienced brethren still holed up in taverns, singing for their supper. And yes, we who have a bit more experience do that from time to time too. It's a great way of hearing all of the rumors and spreading one's fame among the people. Eventually, you get into enough of these places, and you don't have to ask to go places. People invite you in all the time, to a variety of circumstances. Of course, a gentleman doesn't tell about all of those circumstances, but as you can understand, it's an exciting life. A bard who forgets their place, however, can be a dead bard very quickly. We have to remember that even if we follow a one of the wartime colleges, we're generally still not the best choice to be up at the front of a fight. We're better supporting somebody who is up at the front of a fight, or flanking in, possibly forcing our way or gliding our way through a combat so that we can strike at casters or ranged weapon attackers in a way that they can't defend against so well. Wizards have a hard time casting spells with a rapier upside their nose, you see. Those who are peppering your allies with their bows, if those bowstrings get cut with your longsword, they're going to have to come up with another plan. And by that time, hopefully your allies have taken care of their first ranger defense. Then you can fall back and help buff while the others continue the assault upon the rest of your opponents that you have ruined their plans of defense on. Many, many options are open to bards. The best of us master a sense of style. We cling to a role, and entering into a career as a bard is not something that shackles you down into one given role. Even if you follow and pursue a particular college, you still have a wide plethora of abilities, knowledges that others don't have to draw upon. And, quite honestly, the ones of us who do the best are the ones who will never gain the glory. We don't have the stories written about us, you see. Although some clever bards do put themselves into the story prominently, rarely are we the primary protagonist in our stories. We talk of others and perpetuate their legends, but most of them wouldn't have survived to become legends themselves if they didn't have a bard following them around to sing their praises, to inflate them and pick them up when they needed it. That's our legacy. To be the chroniclers of heroes. To do great things ourselves, but perhaps maybe not always to be recognized for them, it's true. If you crave that kind of glory, best go pick up the heavy armor and the sword and try to draw the greatest amount of blood you can. Or perhaps swash on the leather armor and go and try to steal the greatest prize you can. Maybe dedicate yourself to a god or to the arts and studies of magic and be able to cast the greatest fireball or call down the most divine fire. But if you want everybody else to understand in your group that without you, their jobs would have been a lot harder, you could do a lot worse than to sign up as a bard. I am your host, and I will be seeing you for the next class warfare. Until that time, I am Dirk Casterly, last bard standing, here before you and thanking you for enjoying this performance. Many more to come. I have guests for my next one, so stay tuned. It will be an exciting ride throughout all of the various classes and professions of us adventurers. I doff my cap to you, and thank you once more. Farewell.